diamonds aren't as rare as people think.
Mm-hmm.
And so like with those diamonds, the more expensive they are, the more it shows your love, because if something happens to you, that was the death insurance like for the family in particular. But the culture has shifted and people don't quite understand the meanings of that anymore. But yeah, so you were saying, what was your understanding on
So
the
my
rings? And
understanding of it, so I did not know about rings being like a sort of life insurance before. The way it was told to me is that it was marketed and
mm-hmm.
to symbolize that diamonds are forever. So
Yes.
they have this marketing campaign that said diamonds are forever, and then people started going crazy for them and demanding them as a symbol for marriage. Like if you wanted your marriage to last for eternity, then there has to be a diamond ring involved. Okay, we're alive, and it's an eventful week. Um,
How was your week so far?
well, it's been great. So I keep studying for the upcoming exams. It's funny. It was Father's Day weekend, so first and foremost of
Oh
all,
yeah.
when we're taking this, we want to greet a Happy Father's Day to a lot of people. How many people did you greet a Happy Father's Day to? None. Really?
None.
Oh my gosh.
Because I think it's important for sure, right, to acknowledge fathers and all that. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I don't think it's necessary that one is compelled like because of a particular day. I mean, like it should be throughout your character and throughout like maybe during the week or the month that you kind of remember that. And I don't even I'm thinking about it in the future where potentially I'll be a future father. I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessary that it's like, hey, it's my day. Like children, like I compel you to kind of reach out to me per se. But maybe obviously my views could change. But generally speaking, like I don't like any special day. It could be Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, I guess, like in remembrance of
Mhm.
like uh, um, Easter, like in remembrance of Christ, like all those
Right.
holidays. It doesn't have to be that particular day. And for me personally, I find that most of those days are more for marketing. I
Okay.
mean, because
I
we're in
mean,
the topic about Father's Day, right? Actually, but first of all, yeah, what did you do this week in
no,
regards
I
to
was gonna
Father's
say
Day?
like I greeted like 20 plus people a happy Father's Day, including some of my peers who are about my age, but they're already dads, and I'm thinking, man, these people I used to just goof off with, and now they're actually dads.
I know,
They're
right?
responsible for an actual life of a human being. And like this person, there was this one person who would like this is this one person who would
Mhm.
go surfing on Sundays, who got fired from a job like three times, like within
Mhm.
within a 6 month period, and all of a sudden you hear he's married and he has a kid, and I'm thinking, huh, this guy's gonna have he's having a major life change. But I really see him putting in the effort. He's more responsible now, and it's it's amazing to see how much he's changed. Like, I don't know how much of it is true that having children does change you. I
I
mean,
mean, it
it's
should.
certainly
It
not the
should.
causation, right? Like, it's not the
Uh-huh.
causation, but usually most of the time you see people do have these changes in their
Mhm.
lives, and I do see that with him, and it's just amazing to see, how he's making a difference in his life. His job, I think he's had it for more than a year now. I think he's up for a promotion, and he's well, for as members of the church, right, we take church very seriously, and he goes to
Mhm.
church regularly. I definitely see him more often, and so it's like, wow, you're
Mhm.
definitely doing the things that you need to do. I think he's expecting another child soon, which is like amazing, really. And then you start to think about kids in general and how they really change you. There's there's a lot of controversy going about that right now. There's a lot of
What's the
people saying
controversy?
like the controversy, like it's not like a strong controversy. It's more like people's opinions. Like some definitely, when they get married, a year later they have kids, even though they're not as financially stable. Then you have those who would wait until they're more financially stable, more ready. They want to have a house and a car and a super stable career first before they even have their first child. And then you
Mhm.
have some of those who just like have it out of wedlock, and those who never have kids either. It's a more differentiated kind of world. Before, you'd expect people to just have kids at a certain age. Now it's like, it's different with different people. For me, at least for me, I'm not even married, and then like I said, my friend has
Mhm.
a second kid on the way, which is fascinating. um but yeah, I spent a good amount of time yesterday just greeting a bunch of people, and I think it was a good thing for me because it felt like they were appreciated. It felt like there was someone who is not completely related to them, who just
Mhm.
happens to know them. And here I am just reaching out, telling people like, "Hey, I know it's Father's Day, but I also want to let you know that you're also doing a superb job. The fact that you're celebrating it means you're doing well as a father.
Mhm.
Not perfect, but you're doing okay." And sometimes, especially for guys or for anyone in general, sometimes all we need is someone to tell us we're doing a good job, because most of the time we feel like we're absolutely not. Like, when's
Yeah. Well, I
we
don't
we
think
discount it.
I think it was a great opportunity to do that because of this particular day, but I don't think it was necessary because of the particular day. Like going back to what I was saying with the marketing part,
Right.
I mean, I actually want to relate this back to the beliefs of like not having tattoos, being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, where you don't need a tattoo, or like a cross somewhere in your body to represent Jesus Christ. Like that should be a part of who you are in your day to day life, and not like this symbol is who I am. Rather, it is who you are as you act out your life. And so that's kind of how I see these holidays. Um, but at the same time, like I do live in this reality where people have certain sentimental feelings for those holidays.
Right.
um, and so I mean, like let's take advantage of those moments, where maybe in a particular holiday in the United States anyways, where there's like a holiday off. It's not like I believe that we should not have a holiday off. Like we should definitely take advantage of those moments to be more sentimental part of the growing that culture here. um, but yeah, so you were just mentioning about greeting people during that.
I think it's like, I get your idea with where it's a marketing thing. Like, and now that I think about it, was it a bad
I
thing
mean,
that I
you and I
bought
both
my
were in a
like?
particular marketing class,
Yeah,
and
it's definitely part of it. It's definitely like, I get that that
I,
it's part of like maybe a
it,
scheme, but as people
well, it
call it, but it's
reminds
good.
me of one of the things that we've learned was really to take advantage of every single day. So like, every single day, when you look into it, there's the Brother's Day or something. Like there's all these super
There's a
niche.
Brothers Day.
Of course, there's all these very niche holidays like Brother's Day or Grandfather's Day, Grandmother's Day, and everybody's making all these different specific days for certain holidays. And then as a marketer, you should be aware of those things so that you can capitalize on
Right.
what everybody's talking about. So, but after learning a little bit of that, more of like the background of those particular holidays, or even Valentine's Day, right, where
Mm,
chocolates are being sold now, there's all these opportunities for that. I'm a person that, especially where I kind of grew up, where I remember, for example, my mother being a nurse, she had the opportunity, for example, and working in Christmas and
mhm.
Christmas Eve. And like, let's say she would get paid 3 times the rate if she works those holidays. And it was like, to me, as a kid, I was like,
Mhm.
that's such a no brainer. Mom, it's okay. Go ahead and work like the Christmas and the Christmas Eve, if you
Right.
want to, like that is okay. We do not need to celebrate like everybody else celebrating on the same day, you
Right.
know. Like, and so the way it shaped me was funny enough, like in airlines, the days leading up to Christmas is like a premium, right? Because a lot of people are trying to get to where their families are or where they're gonna celebrate Christmas with their families. But on the Christmas day itself, it's actually really cheap in comparison to everything else because everybody else that
Mm-hmm.
wanted to travel already traveled. But
Mm-hmm.
how I saw it, like especially cost value analysis,
Mm-hmm.
if you could go during Christmas Day, well, the flight is cheaper. You don't have to feel pressured to have those same sentiments, I guess, as everybody else on that particular day. Um, and then part
Mm-hmm.
of this for me was the fact that something that helped me with those days is like my birthday, my brother's birthday are like 1 month apart. And
Right.
so normally we would really celebrate one person's birthday, like for both of us. Like one person's birthday is like for both of us, right? And
Right.
so like I kind of understood the idea of shifting the sentiment of that day into something else that makes more sense. For example,
Mm-hmm.
if your birthday falls in the line where, let's say there's a finals and your birthday falls on a Wednesday, let's
Mm-hmm.
not celebrate your birthday on a Wednesday. Let's celebrate it after, or probably
Like on a
after,
Saturday
on a
or a more
Saturday. Yeah,
realistic day. Yeah.
yeah. So it makes sense to me, and that's always how I've viewed those holidays. But
Yeah.
but you
I'm
you seem
thinking
to
of
have
it
a
now.
really big importance of like the holidays and how you should celebrate it.
Well,
Like,
because
what are
like
your thoughts?
I think it has something to do with how we grew up. Because you grew up with your mom who's working as a nurse, and nurses are one of the jobs where, you kind of have it's an important job where you kind of have to work on the weekends sometimes and holidays sometimes. It's not a typical job where you can get a typical day off. Not like an office job where you and I work, where, oh yeah, the office recognizes it as a holiday, everyone's off. And my mom, she works most of the time she works online. She works for these companies who are based in the US, and they
Mhm.
recognize it as holidays, so they obviously get it as times off. And when I think about it, the holidays have more impact and more meaning. You know how when you do something special for some reason, and when I was married as well, this had some profound impact. For some reason, if you do, like, say you do the dishes for your spouse or your partner,
Uh-huh.
it's somehow like if you do it on a regular day versus on like Valentine's Day, it's somehow more romantic on Valentine's
Yes.
Day.
Yes.
And
Well,
it's fascinating. Like I'm trying to think if you think do you think that it's becoming some sort of unhealthy, because as we talk about it, it's just like the same day. You're doing the same thing. It's just like how it's marketed by others to make it feel special. Does that
well,
impact
to
have a negative impact on us?
to me, I feel like it's more marketing. But however, I recognize that there are real
Mm-hmm.
like sentiments towards those particular days. Because outside
Mm-hmm.
of those days that everybody knows about, there's also the days that are more personal to you, such
Right.
as like you were just talking about maybe your anniversary when you got married, or
Mm-hmm.
even like. But I think we take it a bit too far potentially when, let's say, you're gonna remember the anniversary of when you got married, and then the anniversary of this is just particularly in dating, but like maybe the anniversary of when you guys first even became officially boyfriend girlfriend, maybe the anniversary of when you guys first hugged and then kissed, and then like
Okay, that's
you
a
start
bit
adding
much
up,
even
you
for
start
me.
you start adding up those things, and like how I see it is just your character as a whole. It's similarly to that tattoo analogy. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need like the name of your wife and your spouse and the
Right.
date where you guys got married or something like on your neck or somewhere where people can see that's more
Right.
visible. Rather, it should just be your character throughout who you are in your day-to-day life. um, and however, like there are certain days that is going to be more important to you, so I can
Mm-hmm.
recognize that, like maybe like there's a funeral or like the anniversaries once again. It's just to me they're just days. I can
Mm,
step away from it and kind of recognize that. However, like we do need some of those days to be more to kind of self-reflect more. Maybe, for example, during Christmas, have Thanksgiving, Christmas, have that level of gratitude, like
right.
because as people we fluctuate with our emotions and our thoughts, and so it's sometimes good to have that lingering thought-provoking moments, maybe in Thanksgiving, where we can, or leading up to Thanksgiving, leading up to that particular day, where we
Mm-hmm.
can be more focused on that, let's say for gratitude or like a
Mm-hmm.
particular Christ-like attribute. And to those that don't believe in a particular religion, just having those self-awareness thoughts leading up to a certain day. And it doesn't have to be like the world's religion, the world's holidays. It
Right.
could be like your own, like family traditions, things like that. And so, so Father's Day to me, like I probably should have, because what's the harm? But at the same time, to me, I don't necessarily feel shame from not.
Mm.
But I can recognize why it's a lot more beneficial than not.
Yeah, I see it as like the best way, and this is my career finance guy in me talking. I see it like these days, these holidays, like leverage days, where if
Mhm.
you do something right, so in a portfolio, right, if you borrow money and if you get leverage, the returns are either greater, or if you suffer a loss, your loss is much greater. And so with these holidays, if you do something special, it's like, oh yeah, you get bonus charisma points, I guess is what you would call them. Like you get bonus charisma points, but if you don't do something, you somehow end up in like in the negative charisma zone level.
Mm,
And I definitely remember that in my former marriage. And it's interesting because at some point in my life, you get at some point of your life you just get very busy. You try to be understanding, and it's not like you don't care, but it's also like there's also stuff that's demanded you of work and of school and of your profession as well, that
mhm,
sometimes you're gonna have to forego these days, like with your mom. I have a hard time. I hope that if I do end up getting married again, it's something that I'd have to be very straightforward with my spouse, is that these days will probably not have as much of a special impact, because there's 365 days in a year. Out of 20 of them is like a special holiday or a special recognition day,
mhm.
and I probably won't be able to time it because of work and other things. Like right now, I have an exam. You know how many times I've had to tell people, no, I can't go out on vacation? You know how many times my family members have been disappointed because we've had Philippine holidays and I said, no, I got to do this. I have to do this for my work or this for my exam preparations. And they were
Mhm.
they were kind of disappointed. And now it's like, now my family even thinks like, oh, you're never free, or you're like, what are you talking about? I'm just not free on the
Well,
days that you'd like me to go.
yeah,
There's other days in the year that maybe I could. um
yeah,
but then it's like now they're not available, kind of a thing, so it's gonna be hard to work that out.
mhm.
Seeing it as it is, I think it has more
I
negative
think
impact on society
it's
because
it's
of
it's like
that.
a give and take. And you were talking about that. I think like they want you to be free when unfortunately you can't, and it's good that you recognize those boundaries. But also, it kind of reminds me of how like my anniversary is coming up.
Oh shoot,
However,
yeah.
it's like not on the greatest day. It's in the summer, and you know, so rather than us actually doing something on that particular day, we kind of like moved it forward to maximize July 4th holiday to do something. So we can enjoy like a 3-day holiday on that, and then do something big rather than try to force it on that particular the dates that we could, but then we really can't enjoy it as much in comparison to like a 3-day holiday in which things are a lot more flexible around the world.
Right.
So there's that balancing act, and then thankfully we're not so emotionally attached on like for sure it needs to be on that day. And I fear that a lot of, I mean, obviously maybe this is too logical in a way and I'm dismissing that emotional side of it, but if you're so caught up like you have to do something on a particular day, then you're really losing out on a lot more experiences because you're so forced to do it that day. In my
Right.
case, for example, like let's say in the middle of summer, like there's so many people, right, that are more free to do X, Y, and Z. So then when you are,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like going to Disney World or like a particular attraction where everybody else is free as well, the
Right.
quality of time there isn't as good as, let's say, if you went there during a weekday, but you're like, you guys are able to go there on a weekday. Most people can't because
Mm-hmm.
they have work, but because of that there's
Right.
less people, then you're able to really enjoy that moment. So there's a level of, there's a balance to it where there's the value as well as when like the cost of
Right.
trying to get to that point. I mean, I'm just like try not to be so single focused on that on a particular day. Like it's either that day or the highway kind of deal. Because
Right.
you're going to be missing out on so much. And I think there's also the emotional burden that comes with it because life happens. And like, are you really willing to like potentially something bad happening at work because you're so you have to do something on that
Mm-hmm.
day, this arbitrary cage that you put yourself in
Right.
when really there was no cage. It was more free flowing, and you probably could have had a better deal on particular days. I don't know. It's just not to be so
Oh,
caged with one idea.
I'm thinking when you're saying that, I'm actually thinking of this book I'm reading. So I'm reading this book by Mark Manson.
Oh, do you
His
have
book
the book right
is
now?
um like it's on a digital, but not on my
Oh, okay,
computer.
yeah,
But
it's a
like
digital. Okay.
his let me look it up. So his book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F Word.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, you're still reading it.
um,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm reading it because it's actually interesting. Like first of all, the title is catchy. Like it's during the time where everyone is like, "Oh yeah, bad words are like don't use this," and then this guy just goes ahead and puts this on
On the
puts
title.
the yeah puts this on the title. Okay, and here we go. I'm sharing that. There we go. That's the name. That's the book. If anyone wants to, so this guy Mark Manson, what he says on his book is that we can't care about everything. I mean, doesn't say, I'm not gonna say it word for word because I'm trying to stay, I'm trying to refrain from vanity speaking, and I'm not persecuting anyone who does that. But anyway, um, I don't know. I just have a moral conscience when I do say it in public. I say it in private, like when it's just me, but like with people around, I'm like I lose all confidence to say it. Uh, anyway, anyway, this guy. Okay, so this guy he comes up and he says we care about too many things, and he goes to this part. I'm in the part where in a relationship, when we care so much about all the wrong things we lose
Mhm.
sight of what's important in the marriage. Let me give you an example for the one that you gave. If it's more important to you to actually celebrate your anniversary on that actual day and maybe posting about it than it is to have it on a more reasonable day when it's more comfortable, then by that you care more about how you feel. Like you care more about what it makes you feel rather than what is comfortable and more realistic for you and your partner.
Is
And
it that
so
or is it the perception of it? Because you were just mentioning, like, I'm thinking about that and maybe like social media and how it relays with how you post it. Because
it's
like if you do
his
something at a later date, you can't post anything so extravagant uh,
like he says
for
it
that
he
day,
says
right?
it he says it in a way where it's not it's when you're in love and you celebrate it and these like little ticks that shouldn't as matter as much like celebrating on the actual date, like if it super matters to you, then you probably care more about yourself and how you will feel and what matters to you and what's important to you rather than actually caring for your partner, which is actually essential, which is essential in any relationship. You're supposed to care for one another. Not everything's going to go 100% as planned. Not everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows all the time. And so sometimes you got to take a back seat for a bit. But if you care more about how you feel on that day, and you let it impact the rest of your week or whatever, like for example, say the spouse, they don't celebrate their anniversary on that specific date, and then let's say the wife, for example, she throws a tantrum, she throws a fit, she feels bad for the rest of the month. And when they actually celebrate it, she's like, "Oh, this is still like the worst day ever because this didn't happen on my anniversary, the actual anniversary date." So you care more about the actual anniversary date and what happened then and how it made you feel then than actually caring about your marriage as a whole. So that's what he said. And then there's this quote. So I'll read this. Oh, where is it? So he says this in his book. People with strong boundaries understand that it's unreasonable to expect two people to accommodate each other 100% and fulfill every need the other has. People with strong boundaries understand that they may hurt someone's feelings sometimes, but ultimately they can't determine how other people feel. People with strong boundaries understand that a healthy relationship is not about controlling one another's emotions, but rather about each partner supporting the other in the individual growth and in solving their problems. So it's not about having things the way you would want. There's going to be times like if like this is why I'm very sensitive when it comes to dating, and this is why I think it's um
Oh, he
this is
said
why
so.
I've had to cut I've had to cut a lot of people off when I talk to them, because for them it's like, oh, you don't reply, you don't care about them, or oh, you said this, therefore it translates to that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? These are the people that I would meet. And my whole point of that is that it's not always going to be perfect.
Mhm.
It's not going to go the way you would hope. In fact, one thing I'm hoping out of a marriage, if you're wanting an extravagant marriage, I might have to back out a little bit. It's semi it's like, if you ask me, like, I just want to elope, like I just want to get married, not invite people, and then all of a sudden tell people like, yeah, by the way, we got married, surprise. That's how I intend to do it. And so,
Oh, he's outing himself.
yeah, it's there's obviously got to be some sort of compromise at some point. But I've learned from my failed marriage that caring too much and always saying, like, when things didn't happen the way that it was supposed to, I kept blaming myself and I kept taking too much responsibility for things that were not supposed to be my fault. And
Mhm.
so from learning from that, I've learned that, okay, I'm going to do this. It's important that we have food on the table and that the kids are provided for. If you're offended because I have to do the things that I need to do to get stuff done, then we're probably not going to be a good fit. And
No, bro,
I
hopefully you
believe,
didn't have kids with that person.
no, no, at some point, like hopefully before that, you'll already figure it out. This is why it's also getting very, very trickier, because the world is so diverse in opinions nowadays. And my whole point is of saying this is, I think that having these events have impacted us more negatively. I'm not saying that we shouldn't celebrate them. I think it's already there. It's already a matter of fact. It's already given. If you can celebrate it, good. But let's learn to take a step back and acknowledge that everyone isn't perfect, and
Mhm.
that if this doesn't happen on a certain date, like what you said, let's not take too much meaning into it.
No,
Let's
yeah,
not
no,
take too
no,
much meaning into
no.
it.
I think that is the more reasonable. Unfortunately, like we're both kind of like similar in thought, though, like more logical on it. However, I can understand the emotional aspect of it. Like especially when we're talking about this, you can't really put off, like, for example, an anniversary of someone's death, right? It's almost as if, like, I can understand if they're the people alive. they can be more flexible because we're alive. But to me, as a sentimental guy, there also is that emotional attachment where, let's say, something impactful happened on a particular day, and you want kind of to put a lot of your energy and effort into that particular day.
Mm-hmm.
But being alive, you need to be adaptable on what's the reality of what's happening. Like you could try it, but then maybe so many things happen. Maybe, for example, your flight there, your transportation there broke down, or bad weather. Um, Other people that are gonna be there with you can't make it, so it's just you yourself. It's kind of maybe awkward.
Right.
And so there is that balancing act between that. But the most important thing, like you mentioned, is like the sentiment, I think, needs to be there, and we should not overreact because something did not happen
Right.
on that particular moment. I think there's a lot of leeway there and a lot of forgiveness on both sides on what can or cannot happen. Because at the same time, like, we got to recognize these are also just days. Like, this is so arbitrary. There is 365 days in a year, really 365 and a quarter. And then it's like, are we going to really, and then
Wait, is it really a
something happened?
quarter?
Well, of course, because there's the leap year every 4 years.
Oh, true.
And so that, in addition with, like, let's say, the Philippines to the United States, like more or less, there's like a 13-hour difference or so. And so is it like, when did the days actually happen? Those are things that
True.
I think when you're like, you're too focused on the trees rather than the forest, kind of deal.
Let me ask you this though, because this is oh, so both of us have agreed on this. But like, what if you're asked? It's a way to show appreciation. Like, what if it's a way to show appreciation?
Of course. I
And
mean,
like,
mhm.
does like would it how would you respond when people say, oh, that translates to, it's your way to show that you actually put in the effort. You're stepping out of your comfort zone and you're actually doing this on this particular day. Like, how would you respond to comments like that?
I mean, well, how do you mean? Because
Because like, for example, like, let's see, Valentine's Day, like, say you're working on the office and you have to work late. Oh, but you showing up and doing something on Valentine's Day, especially, is a way of showing that your partner or your spouse is more important than work. Like, how would you respond to that?
well, I think it's not so black and white, right? It's the idea that
Mm-hmm.
if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and so
Mm-hmm.
you don't plan everything on that day. You kind of hopefully talk about it, kind of plan ahead, months in
Mm-hmm.
advance or weeks in advance at least, to kind of gauge the expectations. And I think in this
Mm-hmm.
particular example, this is more of a communication where if somebody says like they're gonna be okay with something fine like Netflix and chill, um, that should be the expectation that was set. And so there can be a take backs where that was a trap. You should have done more. That was a trap
You
to see
should have
if
at
you were
least
just going to
talked
do
about it
that.
beforehand.
Well, like, what I mean is, if somebody said that watching like Netflix and chill was adequate, you can't go back, and when that day happens and that's all you guys did, that you get super frustrated with your spouse because that was the expectations that was set. And this is the communication part, and where people can't read each other's minds as much as we want them to. And this is like understanding yourself to understand others comes in play.
I think I like that. That's something that I have to admit that I haven't really been very good at. Is that I usually don't talk. I really don't talk about it beforehand, whether I can or cannot. Like say it's going to be like your partner's birthday, for example. I usually fail to talk about it beforehand and like set the expectation. And looking back, maybe I wish I could have done that. Is like set the expectation beforehand, like, oh, we can do this for your birthday, or oh, we can't do this. Can we do it
Well,
on another
it,
day? Instead of like dropping the bomb on the actual day
yeah,
itself.
I think this comes into play with the what is it called? Your love language, understanding love languages in with couples or just with relationships. Because some people like surprises and some people do not. I, for one, for example, I appreciate surprises, but I prefer no surprises. I prefer knowing what's going to be going on. Um, and it comes from the understanding that if somebody's going to give me, for example, like these shoes, for example,
Right.
and like these are like really expensive shoes, but like, and they're a shoe, what is it?
Like,
Shoe expert. Like they really know a lot about shoes, and so
yeah.
they value this shoe. And let's, for example, like they bought a shoe for $300 for me, but I'm like, these are great shoes. Like I think, right? I'm not a shoe
Mhm.
expert, but I can like recognize that he's an expert, so these shoes must be great. But then his style is different from mine, and although it was a $300 shoe, I might value it at 250. And this is the economics of it, right? Where we learned that technically, by a logical point of view, the best gift you can give is technically cash, because that is the most flexible gift. While when you give something more specific, for example, a friend giving me a shoe for 300, but then I'll value it at 250 or even less because of my views on it, of the company, maybe, of the quality, of the
Yeah.
colors. There's all these different variables. And so, in the economic sense,
Right.
that transaction lost $50. But at the same side, on the flip side, it could be that they know so well that, this thing of 300 is actually to me like a 450 because of the surprise. So there is that
Mm,
upside. However, I prefer to understand these transactions as one to one, in which I'll know what to expect, or at least have an
mm.
understanding that there is maybe some transaction
Right.
happening to kind of prep me for it. Because I can appreciate, for example, the gesture, which is
Mm.
maybe putting a dollar value to it. Maybe the gesture itself was like $75, but because it's
Right.
75 and it was still a value of 250, I really thought the shoe was like $175 as a shoe itself. But then the gesture increased it to 250. So like there's also that too much of a being a nerd on the idea of it, but this is where it needs to be kind of conveyed on what the expectations are.
Right.
And part of it is
It's
you need to know yourself to be able to solidly communicate with another person what the expectations are and what you guys are
mm,
like, how the relationship is. um and like having that boundaries, like when you were saying, like being able to say no to things when people want to have fun, but like in this case, like recognizing what you want and what you don't want. Because somebody could, for example, like seriously, somebody could give me like super expensive alcohol, and I'll be like, I really appreciate the gesture, but to me,
oh,
I just valued that whatever the gesture was, let's say $50. Like I appreciate the gesture itself, so it's like 50. But then it was like a $200 alcohol thing. I'm just like, I personally, I think we'll just use this as like a
display or like a
display
collection something.
display, or potentially like you can always like do the style of cooking where it burns the alcohol, but like that's
Yeah.
probably just a
Yeah.
display. Right? So this is why the communication and understanding who you are comes in play.
I mean, I'm thinking about that, and I'm also thinking because in preparation for Father's Day, we have to get my uncle a gift. And me being the practical, I call myself a practical idiot because sometimes I don't understand all these social cues that are happening. And I was like, just get the guy a gift card because, like you said, for it's better. They have the freedom to choose what they want, and
In
it
that
was
particular brand.
yeah, it's like yeah, and it was explained to me that you don't do that. You don't give cash or a gift card because the process of choosing a gift shows your thoughtfulness and the amount of time that you took
Oh yeah.
to actually consider the person.
Yes.
And that
That's
makes
very
sense.
valid.
And I'm like, shoot, so this is actually much it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, that we took all these marketing classes and we know how these,
No,
I'm gonna call them schemes.
it's not a
Because
scheme. It's not a
it,
scheme. Like the
like for the sake
market,
of
I
it,
guess. Uh-huh.
it's like just like the way that it's where did we come up, where did we come up with this stuff? Like,
Well,
props to
it's
the
not
guy who was
marketing,
able to think that
but
you have to think, be very thoughtful of the
mhm.
person to give a gift. But like,
But I don't think this came from marketing itself. I think this came from culture. I think primarily from culture. Because in from what I remember, like you don't ever just really give cash to somebody in their birthday, really, or like even necessarily a gift card, because like you mentioned, it almost shows as though you weren't thinking about them too much. If you really like the flip side of it is if you really know who they are, then you would give them something that they themselves did not know that they wanted.
mm, this is
Uh,
why, like, back at BYUY, I always prefer to cook. I don't know if you noticed it, but every time it's someone's birthday, I'm like, I'll cook because it saves me the time of trying to think, what do I have to get this person? Like,
yeah,
just cook a delicious meal and you're good to
but I
go.
mean, at the same time, we're not robots. Like when I mentioned that example, like I still appreciate for example, even a card, right? I can still
Mhm.
appreciate birthday cards or something, where there's nothing economic of value, but there is that sentimental value, which is like pretty high cost, even though on their end it was economically speaking a card and some letters, right?
Mhm.
So there is that balance of the sentimental side, the level of thought that comes in play, and then like the economic, like how much is the material itself, and then the time of like writing it. But overall, the feeling has to be there. The intentions are there,
Mhm.
and so that is just to go about and say that it's really important to make sure you understand who you are, and then you are able to communicate that to other people. And I think the more
Mhm.
confident on you know who you are, the more you're certain that if there is some sort of miscommunication, it's probably an external miscommunication rather than you yourself not knowing what you think or what you like.
Right. It's
So
fascinating to think how this has evolved. It's man, it's all these special days, and not even don't even get me started on special gifts like diamonds for weddings. Like, okay, I've just reading. I was reading about this article the other day about how diamonds were not really supposedly for
Mhm.
marriage. It was just like a cheap.
Oh,
Before, diamonds
whoa,
weren't even special. Before, it wasn't a cheap rock, but it's like,
whoa.
it's not so special.
I feel like my understanding of why even like marriage rings is slightly different from maybe what you've learned, because my understanding of it was, so generally speaking, actually, like why these rings or these marriage proposals are going to be expensive, primarily that item is to provide for the spouse, like particularly the woman. If anything happens to the husband, the
Wait, what?
woman can sell, for example, like the idea behind it is it should be about like 3 years worth, or either that 3 years or 3 months worth, like whatever that time frame is.
Really?
Yes, so that's why like it's important that it's kind of valuable. So if something happens to the husband, and this was before a time when like health insurance really exists, death insurance, what would happen is the wife would then be able to sell that ring and then have like some sort of money coming in for some time, and then she'll have to take care of the kids and take care of the household. That's the reason. And in addition to that,
Really?
there is the marketing gimmick where before like the rings and everything, there was no ring to in
Hmm.
Western culture to solidify a marriage. It was just you guys are married. It's only
Interesting.
much after that, and then in addition to that marketing, like with the different diamonds, because diamonds aren't as rare as people think.
Hmm.
And so like with those diamonds, the more expensive they are, the more it shows your love, because if something happens to you, that was the death insurance like for the family in particular. But the culture has shifted and people don't quite understand the meanings of that anymore. But yeah, so you were saying, what was your understanding on
So
the
my
rings and
understanding of it, so I did not know about rings being like a sort of life insurance before. The way it was told to me is that it was marketed and
mm-hmm.
to symbolize that diamonds are forever. So
Yes.
they have this marketing campaign that said diamonds are forever, and then people started going crazy for them and demanding them as a symbol for marriage. Like if you wanted your marriage to last for eternity, then there has to be a diamond ring involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no now I'm kind of confused, like how is that going to
Well,
work out, because there's
I,
two different
I think
stories I'm
well no,
hearing.
I think it's just the story can merge. So initially it is the idea that marriage is just marriage. There's not
Mm,
a symbol per se regarding that, but then it some sort of company came up with the idea of those symbolic meanings that people are married, and then it took a life of its own with particularly diamonds.
mm-hmm.
And because we know diamonds is just pencil graphite with particular pressures. Like
Right,
we
and
can
then just
create diamonds fairly easily in that they're not rare. And so I think that's like what the marketing happens there. But the idea of those marriages is just like if you need to have something valuable, because then especially like even in our time in a more patriarchal like history, what would the woman do if her husband passed away or something happens to the husband? Like she's gonna be destitute with her kids. So that was the insurance in everything. But I think through that I can understand where the marketing gimmick comes in play, as well as everything getting more and more valuable. But to me, that's why for us particularly, I didn't use a diamond. Rather, it was
because like there's life insurance now. You don't
emerald. Well, yeah.
necessarily.
So yes, so it's not necessary. And when we're talking about marriage, and you've talked about this about eloping, I think studies have shown that people that spend a crazy amount of money on their wedding day eventually don't really have the best of marriages. That it kind of
Mm,
dissolves easily, because how I see it is the marriage itself is more like an expression, an outward expression to other people. Because
mm,
I think the average cost of marriage in the United States is around $30,000. It's
mm-hmm.
quite huge. And so
So
imagine spending a fraction of that, 5,000 max, and then spending like imagine 5,000 and then saving that 25K for like a down payment for a house or a
mhm.
bigger honeymoon. That to me, just even from a third party perspective, like just looks so much better than this great wedding in potentially Hawaii or like somewhere in
Mhm,
Europe that everybody else has to go there as well. So it's not just the
mhm.
cost for you guys, it's also the cost of the guests that have to travel to your destination.
Yeah, I want to add as well is that, for me, and I hope for other people, is that you don't really have to prove anything to other people. You don't have to prove to people how much you love and care for others, and that's kind of for me. Like I've never had to prove anything to anybody. You just kind of know, like, oh, I'm up to this. If you think I'm a pretentious douchebag, then I'm a pretentious douchebag to you. But if you think I'm the nicest person, then I'm the nicest person you like. I don't care so much about what my I don't care so much about what you think of me. I care more about my reputation, in a sense
Hmm?
that I'm like it's kind of hard, right? Like I care more
What?
about my professional reputation like I'd rather say, like my reputation at work. Is he trustworthy? Does he work hard? Is he reliable? That's the only thing, like that's important to me in a career.
Uh-huh.
um but for others, it's like for people who know me and who actually, is actually cares about me, they know that when they ask something of me, I try and help them with whatever they need.
I'm
Okay,
gonna push
within
back a
reason.
little bit because
Okay, go
to
ahead.
me it's sounding like you care more about your work relationships than your personal relationships.
I care about the relationships and the reputation that matters. First impressions matter.
And so which
Yeah.
reputation does matter, because
So
from what I'm hearing and understanding, it's almost as if you're it's like it's
yeah,
not either
this is
give this or
tricky.
that, but it sounds like you throw away your personal life for a better, more professional one.
I think the better way to phrase it is I think the better way to phrase it is my reputation matters more to people who are close to me, rather. Even that is
Well,
not like,
because
or
I
have
think
have a significant impact in my life. Like for
uh-huh.
example, if you're some guy I met on campus and I just had you for that one class and you think that I'm the worst person ever and I never have to talk to you again, I'm like, okay, like I don't have to be liked by every person on the planet. I don't
Of
have
course,
that need. And
of
I
course.
don't have the need to like prove to everyone that I'm this kind of I'm this kind of person. What's more valuable to me is my own self-development and growth, and whether or not I'm becoming more and more like the person I want to become, which is maybe like someone who cares and provides, someone who is trying to constantly learn and to constantly grow. That's like the most important thing for me. Everything else of
Mhm.
what other people think is kind of secondary in nature, and that's probably why I don't care so much about having to have a marriage, like having to have a wedding to show off to other
Mhm.
people. And there are some questions that I've had, maybe that's like, well, isn't it important to show to your wife that this is like a manifestation for how I care for her? Like, no, I've had to prove that in the years, in the time before the marriage, and I have the rest of my life to try and prove that to her. Like the fact that I'm even providing and caring for
Mhm.
her should say something about how much I do care for the person already.
Mhm. So it sounds to me like actually your love language, your number one priority is service. Service is like probably your number one, which is an indication of like you want you doing service for others is hopefully like a reflection of how you show affection and care, and not words of affirmation, for example,
No,
or
like words
gifts.
for me are
So
like,
you like really it's that service that you want to prioritize, which I think like this is where understanding these ideas kind of come in play, and understanding where somebody's motivations are, and so you don't just assume maybe the absolute worst from them, like kind of
mm,
understanding where they're coming from. Because
right.
I can also hearing from what you're saying, I can construe it in a way that is actually really negative from what it sounds like. But I'm trying to see it right now at the most positive light.
I'm a complicated human being. It's probably why I'm divorced at 26. This is not helping. This is not helping my dating reputation
Well,
out
I
there.
think part of that is like 25% of marriages already like end up in divorce, but like
25?
these are
I
just
thought it was closer to
statistics.
50.
These are just it could be higher. Yeah, these are just like the statistics, right? Something I
Mm.
absolutely loved when I was learning in things in psychology was particularly that the statistics does not define who you are, which means that like that statistics with marriage thing does not mean that your marriage is 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Like rather, it's understanding the statistics, but as individuals, we are not those statistics. As a like a Filipino, Asian American, that grew up in Virginia, let's say, it's like, so what
Mm-hmm.
is my political affiliation? What is my religious beliefs? Do we have the statistics on those things? But those statistics is not me. And just like vice versa, you know, people think about the Florida man. The Florida man is not those individual people from Florida. Like each one of them are super different. That you cannot have those statistics and then slap them on some random person in Florida and just assume that you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Like each individual is an individual, so you have to base it on those individual cases, step case by case aspects on who they are and what shaped their worldviews. Just like how probably the worldview of when people think about an American is probably obese, like likes McDonald's, things like that. Yet at the same time, which country has the most Olympic gold medals like every year, like every Olympic year, is the United States. So it's like, what's going on there?
Right.
The statistics does not define the individuals.
It's interesting when you mention about the average American is overweight and stuff. But
Mm.
like my experience talking with these people is like most of these people that I've met and encountered with are like super fit, super active. They did some sports event in high school or when they were younger, and then you have people like our bishop who or like our president for BYU Hawaii and the vice president of academics who goes surfing every morning. And like this is the average U.S. populate. Like this is not the average U.S. population. Like
Well,
where are people getting their statistics?
no. I mean, I think it's important to recognize statistics. It's important to understand how the statistics work, but
Right.
there's the distinction between the statistic and then the individual. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's so many. Like, we know the statistics for maybe a country in Germany, what people believe, and if there's like 100 people in a room, let's say like what's the percentage of them being Catholic? And if we know the statistics, sure, there should be, let's say, 5% as an example. Like
Mm-hmm.
let's say like 30% are Catholic. Now,
Right.
now, now I'm gonna look at 100 faces from that German population. Do I know if they're Catholic or not? Like seeing them, I should not. Like I don't know. I really from that point on, the statistics does not help you know about them individually. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that really important distinction that super grateful for my professor like really hammering it down on us. The difference between that, like we can say that where like 30% of the people in this room, in the room itself, like we really don't know, like probably like statistically 30% sure, but then after that moment, like looking deeper at those individuals, like, I don't know, we don't know what they are, what colors like they like, and it may be something not
Mm-hmm.
as controversial, like what's somebody's favorite color. A lot of people's the most popular favorite color is blue. So then I see a bunch of people, it's like I'm gonna assume that their favorite color is blue. That assumption is incorrect because that statistic that you just got, it does not translate with that group.
Mm-hmm.
But it is just a better understanding on the importance of the numbers, but at the same time, the importance of the individual.
Right.
Uh,
There's definitely it's different when it comes to things when we live in a world. Well, we live in a world that's very I want to say analytical,
I mean, it
but
makes
people are
sense for
still
us
so
to,
emotional. Yeah.
well, it makes sense to kind of have shortcuts of those groups. I think, for
Mm-hmm.
example, a really common shortcut for Asians is that, like, as a third party looking in, is like Asians are good at math. So it's a heuristic. It's a shortcut to kind of just group people because the world is so complex. because like the
Yeah.
world is so complex, but understanding where that heuristic is coming from, like there's some truth to it, but there's also with the individual, there's a gray unknown that you don't know. So there's the truth to it in that heuristic came from somewhere, and
Mm.
it's probably like true or false, and this is where stereotypes come in. Those
Right.
stereotypes has to come from somewhere. It's not like Asians have two heads. It's like that stereotype does not exist. Like it does not exist because there's not like a sliver of truth there. But like the idea, the very academic, for example. I mean, and then when you look
Mhm.
at the statistic, there's some correlations, but that's not. It doesn't just give you the causation there. So there's the importance of distinction of understanding what you do know and what you don't know.
I find it very helpful to know what the stereotypes are because there's a story behind it, and there's some like culture behind it that becomes very very helpful. And for me, like when I'm trying to meet people, I'm able to more like, did you know, like more or less, if they have like five traits, or like if you could base people on their profile picture,
Mhm.
four out of the five, what do you call this? Four out of the five traits, not traits. What do you call that? Like caring and
Characteristics.
like, yeah, four out of the five characteristics
Mhm.
you can pretty much guess, because that's how we are as human beings. We've developed a sense where we're pretty good at determining how these are for other people, and that's also where the sentiment, first impressions last, is very very important. I hate it
Mhm.
when people like think like, no, it doesn't matter as much. Like, yes, it matters so much, because that has a lasting impression on how people will see you. And so yeah, it's something that you gotta develop very very well. It's interesting. It's another field to go into when you dive into the professional world about it. But we've come a long way. We were talking about Father's Day, and then we started talking about marketing and the special kinds of days, and
Holidays.
we ended up, yeah. And it's interesting to see the world that we live in. Like, bottom line, I think I find it very beneficial to understand. People should really understand and learn more about marketing and psychology,
Uh,
because I
I don't know.
like
Like
not like a take a whole course on it, but at least be very aware of it.
it kind of makes me think about the idea you don't need to go to college. You don't need to go to university to kind of know. You just need to be observant and have the ability to critically think. It kind of reminds me of a video that I saw where I think, especially in these times, there's the idea of like the dating gurus
Hmm.
understanding the psychology between men and women, how to better create your Tinder profile, like your dating profile, social media, things
Right.
like that. And all these things, you did not need to go to a college. You just need to be able to observe and see the world as it is and not how it should be.
No,
And
it's like when I'm saying this is like, I'm not necessarily saying everyone should take a marketing and a psychology degree. It's more like, yeah, you have to be observant,
too many
but
people are
sometimes
taking
it's also good.
psychology.
Yeah, like, but like for I don't know, like there's I don't know how many times I've met people who like, oh, why are you going to psychology? Oh, because I had this kind of trauma. I'm like, no, that's not. For
No,
me,
I
it's
mean
not the best
that's
answer. It's like,
that's actually that's a valid reason. I think I just recently was watching this video about a not a sociopath who took psychology because of very selfish reasons so that she could better understand herself and then help others like her. And the way she was able to communicate and just talk about things, especially because she is a psychiatrist or a psychologist, um, she was able to explain it in layman's terms as well as being able to communicate in a way that the normies can understand. And I especially
hmm,
enjoyed the way she spoke about it because what made her different, being a sociopath, is she did not have FOMO. She herself, it was so interesting the way she described it. She herself cannot describe that feeling of like fear of missing out because she never feels that way. The way she
Mhm.
feels is so different from other people. And there is that social stigma of being a sociopath, and she's trying to change that understanding. I think a great example of what she was saying was, if you know about the Netflix series Wednesday,
Mm.
Wednesday is a sociopath, uh, but that does not mean that she could not feel love or have companionship or appreciate the world around her. Just the way she feels about things is so different from others. And then having that understanding where she's coming from is going to be super helpful in terms of like, there's a difference between somebody being rude and just somebody being kind of direct, being
Mhm.
honest. So it helps shape our perspective on where they're coming from. But that is just to say, it's very valid whichever fields they go to. It could be that selfish way, maybe of a trauma. And from my experience, I think a lot of people go into psychology because of that. Um, but also like recognizing that, especially if you're going to be in psychology, you probably need to get like a master's or a PhD after, because there's just so many people that take it. And so,
Right. It's like
my point being that you have to have the ability to critically think. You do not need school to do that. I think what school would be helpful for is it provides you those scenarios in which you can apply critical thinking skills in those scenarios. And it's not necessary to be in college. And I think like this is, I'm kind of just inserting the gaming now. Like even in gaming, you could really apply critical thinking skills in the social aspect, where there's a lot of games that require you to do teamwork, uh, like
mm.
MMORPGs, in which you can be in this bigger group. And how does that actually play out? And how does that game relate to the real world? Because I think if you really think about it, you will see parallels like night and day. It's so obvious sometimes, and sometimes it's not as cutthroat, because
Mhm.
maybe one is a game and the other is real life. But then there's so many things that you can learn from those things if you choose to learn from them. Just thinking about it, on your experiences and how it relates with what you've read to how life is. My point
Mhm.
being, you have to be able to think critically, but then it helps if somebody can point out if you're thinking critically.
So interesting. Fascinating to me because like I'm right now. I guess the point I was trying to make is that you obviously can't have access to these resources all the time, and obviously I don't always recommend people take a marketing and a psychology degree. Like take whatever degree you feel is best suited for you, but like to always also utilize the resources that you have. I mean, there's thousands of books right now that explain how people work and how society works, and it's also people's experiences. It's valuable to be able to learn that within a couple of days. Like I always encourage people to read and to seek learning because there's so much that you can utilize, for your own benefit. All right, I think yeah, we had an interesting run. Any final comments? We've talked about a lot of things. Anything else that you feel like needs to be said to our audience?
um, well, I think the most important thing is, in terms of like going back to the holidays and critical thinking, is just be adaptable to what's happening. um, how I always kind of went about life, let's say, is
Mm-hmm.
like you can either laugh or cry about a situation,
All
and I
right.
prefer to laugh. And so, especially in those sad moments, I mean, there's always a moment where you probably should sit down and contemplate and maybe like it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel those negative emotions, but like you feel those negative emotions, so then so when you are feeling better or when you're in a better place, you can better recognize and be more grateful for when those good feelings, good positive vibes are happening. And so be adaptable, and having those critical thinking skills would really help in just helping understanding where you're coming from. And something that we were supposed to be talking about was like gratitude, but I think hopefully we kind of we talked about it a little bit with the ideas that you don't have to have a particular day like Thanksgiving to be in a feeling of gratitude. It can just be a part of who you are, and little by little, that's going to shape you into like hopefully becoming a more stoic person, or just kind of reminding you of why you're here in the first place. But yeah, just the idea of having the ability to be adaptable in those situations and not laying down and dying, crying,
Right.
but rather being able to get up and laugh about the situations. Because I mean, maybe this is already too early, but it's like, with all the things that happened to you, Chris, it's like you can probably, hopefully, look back and be like, man, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
All things considering. That's just how I see it. But
Yeah, I'm looking back at my life, and there's definitely a lot of things that I've learned. One thing I would always tell people is like, I hope you continue to be proactive and to constantly learn, because there's so much about this world. Like, you start to realize how small you really are, but it's kind of exciting because it just means for me, there's much more to explore. And yeah, life hasn't always been perfect, um, but it can always be better, and that for me is why I always tell people I'm optimistic about the future. A lot of people who I greeted on Father's Day know about my divorce, and it's like, oh man, sorry about that, hope you're doing well. And I tell them like, yeah, I am doing well. This is not the best thing that's ever happened to me, and obviously I wouldn't, no one prefers that you get divorced, but it's also a lot of things that I've learned about it, and so I'm very, very grateful for it. Now I'm back to the dating pool. I'm like, oh, there's so much to do, but you know what? One day at a time. All right, that's all on my end. Thank you guys for joining us. I'll see you guys next week. Ciao.
ciao.